Hare Krishna. The front row students are the most eager, right? I said the students in the front row are always. Chai, thank you so much for inviting me to the famous and very sacred Krishna house. I was asking Kalakanta Prabhu if he had heard of the book. There's a new book that's, have you heard, did you hear of that book? No. There's a book that's, it's a sort of like a novel, and it's called Krishna's Wonderful Form, a guide for the perplexed. And the author, Krishna Chitra Maharaj, based it at Krishna House. And it's a conversation between himself and some students at Krishna House. So I highly recommend you get it. There are apparently 1,500 copies of it sitting in a warehouse in Los Angeles. So I hope you can get it here to share with students. It's really a lovely book. So thank you so much for inviting me. Should we chant Radha Madhava? Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari 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 Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Bhanachari Muna Tira Bhanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Prabhupada, Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nasta Praeshu Avadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 22, starting with text number 26 and going to 34. Is that right? So I read the text and then I'll go back and read the synonyms and.
No, we just read the translations and then in one verse we put the synonyms.
Okay. Translation. Sri Uddhava inquired, although nature and the living entity are constitutionally distinct, O Lord Krishna, there appears to be no difference between them because they are found residing within one another. Thus, the soul appears to be within nature and nature within the soul. Yes. Sure. Oh, great. Okay.
O lotus-eyed Krishna, O omniscient Lord, kindly cut this great doubt out of my heart with your own words, which exhibit your great skill in reasoning.
From you alone the knowledge of the living being arises, and by your potency that knowledge is stolen away. Indeed, no one but yourself can understand the real nature of your illusory potency.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O best among men, material nature and its enjoyer are clearly distinct. This manifest creation undergoes constant transformation, being founded upon the agitation of the modes of nature.
My dear Uddhava, my material energy, comprising three modes and acting through them, manifests the varieties of creation along with varieties of consciousness for perceiving them. The manifest result is the material transformation is understood in three aspects: adhyatmic, adhivik, and ahibhadik.
Sight, visible form, and the reflected image of the sun within the aperture of the eye all work together to reveal one another. But the original sun standing in the sky is self-manifested. Similarly, the Supreme Soul, the original cause of all entities, who is thus separate from all of them, acts by the illumination of his own transcendental experience as the ultimate source of manifestation of all mutually manifesting objects.
Similarly, the sense organs, namely the skin, ears, eyes, tongue, and nose, as well as the functions of the subtle body, namely conditioned consciousness, mind, intelligence, and false ego, can all be analyzed in terms of the threefold distinction of sense, object of perception, and presiding deity.
When the three modes of nature are agitated, the result transformation appears as the elemental false ego in three phases: goodness, passion, and ignorance, generated from the Mahatattva, which itself produced from the unmanifest Paradama. The false ego becomes the cause of material illusion and duality.
So then this will be the last one, the 34.
The speculative argument of philosophers, this world is real. No, it's not real. Is based upon incomplete knowledge of the Supreme Soul, and it's simply aimed to understanding material dualities. Although such argument is useless, persons who have turned their attention away from me, their own true self, are unable to give it up.
What do you think? These verses are very esoteric and intellectual, wouldn't you say? High stuff. Sometimes people say that the Sometimes people say that the Uddhava Gita starts where the Bhagavad Gita left off. So now we'll go back to verse number 26. So do I chant this verse repetitively? Okay. Shri Uddhava Vacha Prakriti Purushascha Bhau Yadi Abhyatma Bilakshano Anyanyapasrayat Krishna Drisyate Nabidataya. Sorry, not so much life for me. I'm missing some of the words. Prakrito lakshate hyatma Prakritischa tatatmani. Someone like to chant? Shri Uddhava Vacha Prakriti Purushaschovo
Anyanyapashrayat Krishna Krishyatena vidatayoh Prakrito lakshate atma Prakritischa tatatmani.
Shri Uddhava Vacha Prakriti Purushaschovo
Anyanyapashrayat Krishna
Krishyate Navidatayo Prakrito lakshate yatma Prakritischa tatatmani. Shri Uddhava Vacha Prakriti Purushaschovo Yadi Abhyatma Bilakshano Anyanyapashrayat Krishna Krishyate Navidatayo Prakrito lakshate yatma Prakritischa tatatmani. Shri Uddhava Vacha Prakriti nature Purusha enjoyer or the entity Yadi api, although Atma, constitutionally, Bilakshano, distinct, Anyonya, mutual, Apasrayat, because of shelter, Krishna, O Lord Krishna, Drisyate, na, it does not appear, Bida, any difference, Tayoho, between them, Prakrito, within nature, Lakshyate, is apparently seen. He, indeed, Atma, the soul, Prakriti, nature, Cha, and Tata, also, Atmani, in the soul. Translation. Sri Uddhava inquired, although nature and the living entity are constitutionally distinct, O Lord Krishna, there appears to be no difference between them, because they are found residing within one another. Thus the soul appears to be within nature, and nature within the soul. Purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Sri Uddhava here expresses the doubt that arises in the heart of an ordinary conditioned soul. Although the Vedic scriptures declare that the material body is a temporary fabrication of the material modes of nature, the conscious living entity within the body is actually an eternal spirit soul. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna has declared the material elements constituting the body to be his separated, inferior energy, whereas the living entity is the superior, conscious energy of the Lord. Still, in conditional life, the material body and conditioned soul appear inseparable and thus non-different. Because the living entity enters the womb of a mother and gradually comes out in a developed body, the soul appears to have entered deeply within material nature. Similarly, by the soul's identification with the material body, the body appears to enter deeply within the consciousness of the soul. What is more, the body cannot exist without the presence of the soul. By this apparent mutual dependence, the difference between the body and soul is obscured. Sri Uddhava therefore questions the Lord in order to clarify this issue. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Sapadantikam Namaham Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Hare Hare. So thank you so much once again for inviting me to Krishna House, such a very special place, and I think a hope for the future of these Krishna House projects. Personally, I find them to be a great hope for the future. So thank you so much. So all of you are part of that great hope. So thank you for being here. Before I discuss this verse, I wanted to mention, are you aware that today is the first day of Purushottam Mas? Did you discuss that at all today? Maybe not, but today is the first day of a very special month that comes only once every 3 years. It's called Purushottam Mas, and it's a special blessing month where in the Vedic calendar, so instead of having a leap year with an extra day in February, they have an extra month. And during this month, whatever you do is considered to be 1,000 times more auspicious. So if you chant japa. It's like chanting 1,000 rounds of japa, or, so it's a super extra credit month. In Vrindavan, they have every festival of the year they observe in this month additionally. So it's a very, very special month. And, you can ask Google Guru, and you can get a lot more details about the stories about this month. But suffice it to say, it's extra credit. So whatever you do during this month will be more blessings. So let's see. Chant a chapter of Bhagavad Gita, or light a deepa like we do during the Kartik month. Any of those things are very special to do during this month. A random act of kindness. Share Krishna lunch with someone at the office or the classroom. Do something, yeah. Okay, so I thought I'd focus on this first verse of this Uddhava Gita. And I don't know about you, but I find these verses to be very heady, very intellectual, and very esoteric. And they're not so easy to delve into. I find them, a bit more difficult than the verses of the Gita. What do you think? You're experiencing that a little bit too? Yeah? So there are many different Gitas. There's the most famous is the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's conversation with Arjuna. But then there's the Gopi Gita, the song of the gopis, Venu Gita, the gopis' prayers to the flute, which is a wonderful chapter of the 10th canto. The Brahmara Gita, the discussion of Radharani's talking to a bumblebee. So there are many, and then there's, of course, a famous book that Lord Chaitanya loved called Gita Govinda. That's not part of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but so many Gitas. So these are Lord Krishna's final instructions to his dear Uddhava before Lord Krishna leaves the earth. So you can consider them to be very, very important, right? Like sometimes if a father's on a deathbed or a mother's on a deathbed and they say to their children something like, I want you to take care of your sister, or something like that, So those are very important instructions, those final instructions. Uddhava is called the foremost of those who are intimate with Krishna. And he's also Krishna's cousin. He's practically Krishna's twin. And he was a great Mahabhagava, which means great, great devotee, highly realized personality. And in the purport so this is Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 4th chapter, 32nd verse. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that the Lord wanted Uddhava to fulfill his mission and share the knowledge that he hadn't spoken even in Bhagavad Gita. So very special verses here. And that purport says, okay, so then this purport that we're looking at today, the soul appears to have entered deeply within material nature, and the body seems to enter deeply within the consciousness of the soul. There's a mutual dependence, Prabhupada, or the disciples of Prabhupada say, the body can't exist without the presence of the soul, and the difference between the body and the soul are obscured. So I was thinking that practically the first thing we learn when we come to Krishna consciousness is you're not this body, right? You're not this body. You hear it over and over again. You're the spirit soul within the body. And it sounds so simple, right? But yet it's so difficult to actually realize that, right? Over there. There's a space here if you want to sit here. Anyway, okay. So let's see, it's difficult to realize. I have a close friend. She's from a Brahmin family from the Madhva Sampradaya. Her family's from Udupi, which is a very famous temple of Krishna in South India. And so she's from this Madhva Sampradaya, and she was saying, when she hears from Prabhupada, hears classes and purports, reads Srila Prabhupada's writings or listens to classes, she's saying she's never heard any teacher emphasize this point so much as she hears, or we all hear from Prabhupada. It's just again and again and again, you're not this body. And he unpacks it in so many, many different ways, right? So, I know myself, sometimes we can also take it for granted. Sometimes I find myself thinking, okay, Prabhupada, I heard it so many times. Okay, maybe could you tell a little story of Krishna? Because I got it. But do we really get it? I don't think so, So I think if we deeply ponder the point, it's actually such a relief. Did you ever think about that? It's such a relief to know that we're not this body. It's such a relief. It's such a liberating joy and a relief that I'm not this body. And I think that this is actually the great adventure that Srila Prabhupada has given us. This is, to me, when I think about it, this is the real hero's quest, not to search out the Holy Grail. In a sense, the Holy Grail is looking for, that search for the Holy Grail. They're looking for what? Eternal life, right? So in a sense, this is the Holy Grail, to embark on this sacred journey to realize that I am the eternal soul. I am not material, And it's also said in the Bhagavatam that this human body is a very important gift. It's a good, strong boat for crossing the ocean of nescience. We have the guru is considered a good captain who understands the navigation systems, and the words of scripture are considered to be like favorable breezes for helping us cross over the ocean of material ignorance. So the body is like a strong boat, but we are the soul inside. And sometimes we often hear that the body is a temple. So the body is a temple, but it's not a temple for worshiping the body, right? It's a temple for worshiping Krishna and the super soul within the body and our own eternal selves resting in this body. It's a temple for worshiping the one who gave us this body, the one who's the proprietor and the enjoyer of my body and my soul. So I think it's important that we understand because I'm going to throw out a thesis here. I think in Krishna consciousness, we tend to, speaking for myself and maybe many of my God brothers and God sisters, we tend to dwell in the head a lot. And sometimes these teachings don't sink down into the heart. But in bhakti, we're meant to understand that the body and the senses are never meant to be rejected, but rather transformed to become instruments of Krishna's will and our own highest intention. So not that we reject, but transform those tools that Krishna's given us. And we're not meant to remain slaves of our minds and bodies. We're meant to realize that Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that matter can never push me down, or melt me, or burn me, or crush me, or dissect me, right? I'm not this body. I'm the eternal soul within the body. So what does it mean? It means I'm not all the things that I think I am that limit me, right? I'm not too fat. I'm not too skinny. I'm not too old, too dull. I'm not a woman. I'm not white, not an ugly American. And everyone else is also not the things that they think they are that limit or confine them. So to me, it's just a mind-blowing, world-changing concept if we actually get it, which I think so often we don't, right? All of those concepts that cause prejudice and discrimination in the world, right? We're not black, we're not white, Indian, Hindu, Jewish, Christian. We're not even Hare Krishnas, or all the things we think we are that define us. I think if we understood this, there would be no other, no sense of the other, right? Everyone, every creature, every living being is my brother, my sister, there'd be no wars, there'd be no hate. I was thinking of John Lennon saying, I'm dreaming, John Lennon was dreaming of this, right? You say I am a dreamer, but I'm not the only one, right? He was dreaming of this. But he thought that getting rid of religion would be a really good way forward. But in a sense, getting rid of sectarian religion and really all sectarianism would be a major step forward. It would be a good thing. But how exactly would we do that? Like apparently growing our hair long and smoking lots of pot wasn't really the answer. Although maybe some people today think it would be good progress, yeah? But so this verse and purport point out the difficulty and the subtlety. I think really the subtlety is being pointed out here, that we're not these material bodies, we are the soul, and we cannot emphasize it or hear it or repeat it or pray on it enough. And yeah, this whole material world is operating under this huge delusion, discrimination, hate, fighting, killing, all based on this delusion, right? Oh gosh, I just thought of this story that I want to share with you. Let's see. My husband was at this, Nitya Prabhu was at this interfaith dialogue in Macedonia, this little country in Europe. And he heard this story from a peace worker there. And after the Soviet bloc fell apart, so there were these two neighbors that were living next to each other for 40 years in I forget which country, but one of the Soviet-held countries. They were neighbors for 40 years. And then when the Soviet regime fell, they started fighting and killing each other because one had come from a Christian background and one had come from a Muslim background, but they were living as atheists really for a long time. So this peace worker said, what's going on? You two were living like neighbors for 40 years, and why are you all of a sudden fighting? You don't even believe in these religions, right? And so this person gave a really interesting answer. He said, because what I do not believe is different from what he does not believe. Is that crazy? What I do not believe is different from what he does not believe. So therefore, so just see how ingrained it is, deeply ingrained, So, huge delusion. I mean, think about it, right? The whole cosmetic industry, the whole weight loss industry, all the social justice initiatives, the nations of the world angling for their own interests at the United Nations, right? The imbalance of greed in the world when I take more than my share, that the way it's described in Ishopanishad, right? So the point is here that the so-called other is my brother or my sister. And if we could just understand and discern and realize this one point, this one doubt that Uddhava is begging Krishna to just cut out of his heart in these verses, right? And Krishna takes it from so many different angles in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter. All the ways that we insinuate ourselves into this illusion, and it's so entangling. We're so entangled in this illusion, life after life, and in the same way, again and again and again, just traveling. It's amazing, for eons of time, just traveling through these different desires that we have, these different kind of phantasmagoric, is that a word? Phantasmagoric desires. It's so crazy. But then we begin this path of Krishna consciousness, and we're trying so hard to give up all that old stuff, that old bad stuff, right? But we can sometimes adopt some very artificial posturing in Krishna consciousness. Have you ever heard this term, spiritual bypassing? Yeah, spiritual bypassing. When I think, well, now I'm a devotee, I'm so beyond all this stuff. Someone becomes a Hare Krishna devotee and they don't call home for 4 years. Have you ever heard of that? You know, they didn't call their mom for 4 years. I mean, I've actually heard of that, you know, and I'm so transcendental. I don't need to, you know, touch base with these people who gave their lives to raising me, you know, or they hate the women because seeing a woman reminds them of their own material desires. Have you ever heard the saying, God save us from the convert? You haven't heard that one? It's really good. God save us from the convert. In other words, someone becomes converted to be a Hare Krishna devotee or a Christian or in anything. And all of a sudden they're more fired up than the ones who were doing it for like 100 years. You know, they got to tell the world and you're all going to hell and you got to do it like me. And it's pretty fanatical. So yeah, God save us from the convert. Now that you're all laughing a bit, I wasn't sure if I should share this story, but it's really funny. So I want to share this really funny. I know Kalakanta is a poet, but he's also a great humorist. And so I want to share this funny story. So there was this one godbrother of mine, he was getting married. And so this is several years ago. So he was getting married. So he called his mom to tell his mom that he's getting married. And his mom said to him, Stevie, is she Jewish? Stevie, is she Jewish? And the mom said, Mom, she's a spirit soul. And the mom said, Stevie, I know she's spirit soul, but is she Jewish spirit soul? So, you know, I mean, I think part of realizing that we're spirit soul is also learning how to navigate, you know, a mother like that, or a journey like this, or calling home, or doing all these things. That it's not that I'm just so beyond these things. I have to deal with it, right? We have to deal with it. So, yeah. So in coming to Krishna consciousness, we're trying to face this sun of Krishna, Krishna Surya Sama, right? Maya, Haya, Andhakar. Maya is like darkness, Krishna is like the sun. So we're trying to turn our face to the sun, but we also need to look deep within ourselves to introspect and to see our own shadow selves and to not deny our bodies, not deny our minds, our roots in our families, our gratitude to all those who helped us to get where we are today, right? Even if maybe there were some problems, some glitches, maybe if your parents weren't the greatest parents in the world. I mean, who has the greatest parents in the world? There's always something, right? So, we are each individual spirit souls, each with our own desires and destinies, but we can also recognize, I think, every step of the way that I'm being helped and I'm being held in community. Like this Krishna house is a wonderful community, but we all have roots in some community also somewhere. So I wanted to share this, what I think is very beautiful. It's by a Protestant minister named Peter Rybal. I really like this, so I want to share it. He says, "We build on foundations we did not lay. We warm ourselves with fires we did not light. We sit in the shade of trees we did not plant. We drink from wells we did not dig. We profit from persons we did not know. This is as it should be. Together, we are more than any one person could be. Together, we can build across the generations. Today, we can renew our hope and faith in the life that is yet to unfold." The future, right? You are all the people of the future, right? Together, we can heed the call to the ministry of care and justice. We are ever bound in community. May it always be so. Do you like it? It's nice, right? So I think Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked us to look deep within ourselves to try to find and begin to try to clear that finer and finer dust in the mirror of our hearts, the dust that makes me think that it's all about me, it's all mine, and all the dust on our consciousness that deludes us to think that we're matter, that we're these material bodies and minds. but we have to really look very carefully. We have to inspect that dust and introspect about it. Yeah, let's see. Where's the time? Are we okay on time? We're fine? Okay, so we can go a little, okay. So I was reminded that once I was in Delhi, and at that time the temple was in an affluent neighborhood. It was a diplomatic enclave called, I forget, Chanakyapuri. That's right, it was Chanakyapuri. And there are all these diplomats living in houses in the whole neighborhood. And I was on this walk with Prabhupada, and it was really interesting because Srila Prabhupada, he was such an interesting personality. He was so peaceful, but sometimes he would become really angry, actually, at people who were turning away or rejecting spiritual truth, you know? So he's on this walk, and he's like slamming his cane down as he's walking. It's like slam, slam, slam. And you could just feel his angst at these neighbors who were, you know, these affluent people who are diplomats from the international community, and they're, you know, having their cocktail parties, and they're just turning away from Krishna, or turning away from God by any name, right? And so, so such illusion, and what's going to be their next destination? Do they know? Does anyone know? You know, right now you're a big fat cat diplomat from, you know, Geneva or the UK or anywhere, and then next life, do you know? I mean, Prabhupada said, Prabhupada quoted some astrologer, I don't want to even say it. Some astrologer said that Nehru was one of the 2 dogs of a man in Sweden. So who knows, you know, where someone goes next. But anyway, so he kept quoting these 2 verses from Bhagavad Gita, which I didn't know at the time, but after the walk, I went and looked them up. And so I want to share these 2 verses. It's like, here, just, you can imagine the visual of this. Prabhupada, slam, slam, slam. And he's just quoting these 2 verses. Bhagavad Gita, 13th chapter, 22nd verse. Purusha prakriti stohi bhunkte prakriti jan guna karanam guna sangosya sadasad yoni janmasu. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the 3 modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil amongst the various species. And then this one, Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, 18th verse. Urdvam gachanti sattvasta madhye tishtanti rajasa jaganya gunavritti sta adho gachanti tamasa. I mean, whenever I remember these 2 verses, it's like I can just like feel Prabhupada's like anger really at these people turning away from Krishna, us all. Here's the translation. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. So yeah, I could feel not only his angst and his anger, and frustration at people turning away, but his deep compassion for them and for all of us who are just keep turning away from Krishna life after life, forgetting that we are the spirit, the soul. So, I wanted to wrap this up, but I wanted to close with some few last verses from a poem of Bhaktivinoda Thakur that remind me of this archetype of the hero's journey. So bear with it. I'll try to say them slowly because his English is archaic. He was writing at the end of the 19th century or beginning of the 20th century. So I'll try to read it slowly. So he's speaking about this, like encouraging the soul, right? He says, so push thy onward march, O soul, against an evil deed that stands with soldiers' hate and lust, a hero be indeed. Maintain thy post in spirit world as firmly as you can. Let never matter push thee down. O stand, heroic man. And then he says, O Saragrahi, which means essence seeker. He says, O Saragrahi Vaishnav soul, so the essence seeker. This is what we're meant to be, essence seekers, right? O Saragrahi Vaishnav soul, thou art an angel fair. Lead me on to Vrindavan and spirit's power declare. And here's the last one. There rests my soul from matter free upon my lover's arms. Eternal peace and spirit's love are all my chanting's charms. So thank you all so much. And what do you think? Any reflections or thoughts or questions about all of this? Yes, here's a question or a reflection or also an argument.
Thank you very much for the beautiful class. I just wanted to ask you if you can throw some light on what did Prabhupada said after quoting those two verses while on the walk. Was he saying anything else other than that?
No, Prabhupada on his walks, sometimes he would be very talkative and sometimes he wouldn't say a word, devotee would get a chance to be on a walk and he wouldn't say a word the whole time. But he wasn't really, I could just feel it was like fierce compassion. He wasn't unpacking it, but what I got out of it was this mood of a very fierce compassion, which I think should be contagious for all of us. I think we should try to imbibe that, not to be, like I think a symptom of a real beginner devotee or that God save us from the convert type of person is, I got it, I'm okay. The rest of you, or thumping the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible, like trying to push it down people's throats. But the idea of compassion, to share it with compassion, but like an urgency, an urgent compassion. That's the feeling I got from him, that time is running out, you dear soul in a human body. Here you are in a human body. How many more minutes, how many more days, how many more years do you have in the human body? And what's next? Are you going to become a dog in Sweden? What are you going to be? How are you going to use these precious few moments you have? So, is that helpful?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. What else is? Maybe what we can do is alternate between the women and the men. I see a hand up there, back there. Shamala, nice to see you. Very nice to see you. Is that all right? Because sometimes, yeah.
Thank you so much. I love the way that you present Krishna consciousness. It always touches me very much. I was curious or wondering if you could share some advice, some things that you have, some wisdom on how to become more non-sectarian as a collective group. How can we do that?
You mean as a Krishna house community?
Yeah, and as devotees of Krishna.
As devotees of Krishna. Yeah, wow, great point, sometimes we hear, I don't know if you've heard this before, that Krishna consciousness is caught more than it's taught. Have you heard that one? So I think hanging out with people who get it is one of the very best remedies. And of course, you have Kalakanta Prabhu here. So what a gift. Could we get are any of you scientists, could you clone Kalakanta? And maybe he could be put in every temple, could clone him. But I know, I think it's we have to create that mood, we have to create a foundation. And the more we catch each other doing it right, I think is very powerful, thank you for what you just did. Thank you for reaching out to that person who maybe we think or I think or someone thinks is the other, Thank you for Krishna lunch. Wow, 50 years of Krishna lunch. Thank you. That is world changing, My husband, Anuttama Prabhu, was in this meeting with the International directors of the Seventh-day Adventist Church at their world headquarters. And this guy came up behind him and slapped him on the back really, really hard and said, "Hare Krishna." And he's like, "Oh no, some crazy devotee got in here." But it was someone who was their international communications director for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and he had gone to the University of Florida and had eaten Krishna lunch during it, so that's world changing. So I think what do they say? Drops of water wear away stone. So Krishna lunch is an example of drops of water wearing away stone. Well, when the mayor of Gainesville, Florida comes and puts a garland on Srila Prabhupada, whoa, so whatever way, it's like, I think each of us is an individual, and each of us, we have our own God-given gifts that are very different, each one from another. So if we can use those God-given gifts in the service of God, Krishna, then Krishna will give us intelligence how to make those inroads in different ways, and to not be complacent that I got it, or I'm going to try to push it down someone's throat, but to do it in a very sensitive way, in a real way, in a compassionate way, which was Srila Prabhupada's mood, Srila Prabhupada was not a fanatical person. He was very, very kind. To try to imbibe that. I don't know if is that a good answer at all? Yeah, I think, try to see the individual and I think when I think of Srila Prabhupada, I think of how he was always seeing the individual. Last time I was here, I was talking about radical personalism, right? So he would answer a question or see someone, really seeing the individual, hearing the individuality of that one person's place in their consciousness in this world. And it was so world changing. I love this story. I don't know, I don't want to be overtime, but I love the story of Prabhupada Satsvarupa, who wasn't a Maharaj yet. He was a brand new devotee. He skipped the first initiation. I'm trying to say this quick. He skipped the first initiation, which he was invited to because he was very humble and didn't feel qualified. And then he came in the next night, delivered his typing work that he was doing for Prabhupada. He thought he could just do service and not really give his heart at that point, And so when he handed Prabhupada the completed typing work, Prabhupada looked at him and said, "If you love me, I'll love you." So I think that's the heart-opening Prabhupada that we have to communicate to the world, because it's not meant to be mechanical in the headspace. It's meant to sink down into the heart, and that's what will be world-changing. When people feel the care of devotees of Krishna, then their hearts will melt. Yeah. What else?
I just wanted to share, you talked about the Jewish soul. Remember our friend Prigozhin in Northern Ireland, during the Troubles, the Catholics and the Protestants were fighting, and they would confront people on the street, "Are you Catholic or Protestant?" If they didn't give the right answer, they'd beat them up.
Wow.
So he came out of his restaurant one night in his dhoti, out of his Govindas, and there were some toughs, and they said, "Are you Catholic or are you Protestant?" He says, "I'm a Hare Krishna." "Well, are you Catholic Hare Krishna or Protestant Hare Krishna?"
It goes deep, right? It goes down deep. What he does not believe is different from what I do not believe. You had okay. Yeah.
Should be good.
Is that Ananga?
Ananda Manjari.
Ananda Manjari. You made it down to Krishna House? My goodness.
I did.
I was looking at you, but I didn't realize that, you take the girl out of New York, right? Wow, congratulations. Here you are at Krishna House. That's wonderful.
Thank you so much. It's Krishna's grace.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this class.
I mean, there are so many points that you mentioned, but what stood to me the most was the poem about, like using the wells we didn't dig and all these things, which reminds me, and actually I was feeling the shift in my body as I was like feeling the first part of the poem and almost expecting the conditioning, which is like to kind of be like, put down the taxes, like you didn't dig it, so like pay for it now, instead of actually what was the shift of natural indebtedness, that we are continuously using resources that are just provided for us, and the way to show gratitude is not to reject them, it's actually to use them with a sense of gratitude, and to do it with a mindset of sharing, because it already comes freely. So why would we actually hold taxes onto them instead of actually just sharing it openly? And so that was that big realization for me of like, can we recognize that interconnectedness and pay it forward, and continuously see that interconnectedness.
Beautiful.
So thank you.
That's Ishavasya consciousness, right? Seeing the interconnectedness of all living beings. That's spirit. And to me, I think, we talk a lot about love in Krishna consciousness. It's the beginning of love, to recognize, to appreciate, to have a sense of gratitude, appreciation, and a sense of awe. I ran into this quote a couple of days ago. I have to share with you. Let me see if I can remember it. How do we remember the sacredness of all things? By radical noticing. To notice to be in a state of awe of all things. Seeing that all things are coming from Krishna. This is the beginning of love. It's the beginning of rasa. Actually, there's a Sanskrit word, chamatkar, which means amazement. And that's the foundation of all the rasas. So, but we want to jump over that, Prabhu, you had a point.
Speaking on, like you mentioned about love, and I was very touched by the poem of Bhaktivinoda Thakur you read. Especially one of the last lines talked about experiencing the love of spirit, and I was just thinking if you can share, like, how do we? It seems like very different from the love of like body that we have, like gross objects that we have in this world. So how do we get a taste of that love of spirit, which makes us lose that the hankering that we have for the love of like gross objects, like bodies?
Great question. Yeah, if you listen to or read leadership gurus, they often talk about begin with the end in mind, like Stephen Covey and people like that. But even in our literature, it's important to begin with the end in mind, because if I'm caught up in the muck and the he said, she said of what's happening right now in my day, and I don't have my eye or my vision on that pole star, that North Star of what am I doing here? Even living at Krishna House maybe can get rough sometimes too. Somebody says something that drives you crazy or whatever. I think I'm going to go back home and eat Cheerios and my mother, whatever, oh, kitchery for breakfast. I don't know, But I think we got to keep our consciousness focused on that North Star, that pole star. And then we won't get so mucked up in all the day-to-day stuff. The first thing I was thinking when you started asking your question, I was thinking of this other verse that I didn't read from that long poem of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. It's, again, his English is archaic, but he says in this one verse, enjoyment, sorrow, what but lots, like when you're making a bet, like what but lots, to which the flesh is heir. In other words, I think I'm this body, so therefore I have to suffer, I have to enjoy. I get so entangled. Enjoyment, sorrow, what but lots, to which the flesh is heir. And then he says something that almost sounds erotic. He says, the soul that sleeps alone concludes in them, enjoyment and sorrow, in them it hath a share. So it's esoteric, but it's like, when I'm not loving Krishna, I'm a soul sleeping alone, you know? Isn't that really far out? Like, you know, can I be living in Krishna's embrace in the spiritual world, but no, I'm here in the material world sleeping alone? It's really far out. So, but I think, yeah, that would be what I would say. Keep your eye. Like Bhakti Tirtha Swami used to quote this one thing: keep your eye on the. Actually, from the civil rights movement, they used to say this. I don't know if you know this one, but keep your eyes on the prize. You know, I mean, here people they would go limp and they would be dragged off to jail, and their dogs biting them, trying to bite them. And they just go limp to be nonviolent protest. I mean, we say this came from Chaitanya, came from Gandhi, and then Dr. Martin Luther King picked it up, you know? But they would just go limp and be nonviolent, being dragged off to prison. How could they do that? It's impossible, right? They're keeping their eyes on the prize. So I think, yeah, I guess maybe that's the point of this class, is this is the hero's quest. To realize that I'm not this body, that I'm the spirit soul. There's no greater endeavor in this world than that. You know, you can try to become a big this or that or whatever, but there's no greater quest than that. So that's what we're doing, that's what we're trying to do here. It's not about a new type of sectarianism. You know, I wear a sari and someone else wears a nun's habit or whatever, you know. It's not about a new kind of sectarian, it's about the ultimate hero's quest. Is that helpful? Good. Anything else? Okay, we have to wrap up. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for being at Krishna House. And thank you for your hope you give me and the world hope for the future. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare God.